So excited to have brothers John, Scott, and James Kawadza in the house today on the podcast for Storm the Gates. And fun
Welcome.
facts out there. We're going to learn all kinds of things today. Family, if you always wanted to know, don't care, you're going to find out anyway. The oldest continuously inhabited city in the United States of America is where Brother John is from. You're going to hear that. And then I'm going to tee up James Kawadza as well. Would love to learn a fun fact about Zimbabwe because that's where James Kawadza is from. So welcome, friends. And John, start with you. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. And we want to get into a little bit of your journey with the Lord and one child and talk about that. But for some of our listeners, we're kind of introducing them to you right now. So let's introduce you.
Great. So great to be here on Storm the Gates. One of my favorite podcasts. I call Shay the Joe Rogan of the GMC. But
Amen.
Come on.
Yeah.
He's got the scriptural holiness aspect. Tell you what, I am the Pan Wesleyan engagement lead for One Child. We are an organization based out of Colorado, 60 years in, that advocates for kids in hard places around the earth. We're in the same space as some of those groups like Compassion International, World Vision, Samaritan's Purse. A little smaller, a little more agile, and specialize more working church-to-church partnerships than maybe others would do. So it's my joy to be in that realm for the last 3 years. And I've been to 24 GMC conferences in the last 3 years. So I've been across the spectrum. It's been really exciting to see what God's doing in the movement. And I'm a member of a church, a Global Methodist Church in St. Augustine, Florida. Shout out Bridge City Church and my pastor, Lou Weber. Jay Therrell's also there, but he's never there. He's always on the road as the superintendent. Kendra's there, and we have a great time.
Awesome. James, tell us about you. We got some of your stats before, but just for the sake of the listening audience, James, who are you? Where are you from? You listed about 14 different things. So what all are you into and how are you connected to this thing?
Right. Well, I'm James Kawadza. I'm married to Memory. We share 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The first one is studying abroad in Germany, studying computer sciences. The other 2 are with us here. Look, this has been exciting. I joined GMC from the UMC. I think it was Jay Therrell who said, lately, if you want to pick fights and argue a lot and not talk about Jesus, you must go to church. So we shipped out and we formed the GMC in Zimbabwe. And I was fortunate to meet John from One Child in Costa Rica at the convening conference of the GMC. And we just hit it off. We're so excited that, we're in this partnership because this is the first partnership that Global Methodist Church has with One Child in terms of Hope Centers. So, we want to make an example or set a standard rather, that everybody is going to follow. And it's been pretty exciting. The response has been good. And the kids here is so excited. It gives you something to really look forward to. And I've always believed that the church should be seen in the community that it is in. And I'm very grateful for One Child. And because for us, it was also a way of evangelizing, because then people see and the church makes sense to them. Yeah, instead of talking about money, you actually do something. We're creating employment for our congregants, and it's fantastic. So we've got support at conference level, we've got support at local level, and we've got people seeing what we're doing. And now when I go to the schools, it's just, Uncle James, do you want to share my sweets? I promise you, it's you're encouraged to leave the next day. We pray for the Lord's guidance in all that we're doing, and we pray for more Hope Centers in Zimbabwe and throughout Africa.
So, James, say a little more about, to continue what you were saying, and Brother Ryan shared with us recently, too. They got back from a trip from Rwanda as our conference here in Mid Texas is partnered with Rwanda as well, and just how what's so important about the GMC is that it's really based and grounded on relational lines and all these relationships that are really important. So podcasts like this and being able to tell the story of one child and getting to know y'all. I love that you said that John and James, y'all connected at General Conference. That started the connection, and now here y'all are, and we're going to get to sort of the amazing things God's doing through one child in Zimbabwe. But James, if you don't mind continuing to kind of just share that testimony of how it's been now in the GMC for you.
All right. So things were a little bit different here. In Zimbabwe, we couldn't leave as churches like what happened in America. Unfortunately, we were misled that the disaffiliation clause, I think it was paragraph 2553, was not applicable to Africa. So essentially, you find that people just walked out and formed congregation. So it was mostly a laity-driven movement. And in the GMC, we don't have general boards and councils like the GBGM. Now we've got church-to-church partnership, conference to conference. That's what we're working. And for countries like Zimbabwe, it has been really helpful because we set up a congregation first, and then if that congregation is able to sustain a pastor, then we give them pastors that have already applied and been accredited by the GMC. So, like I was saying earlier, you find that partnerships with one child really helps in terms of evangelizing, because people mostly in most parts of Africa, and Africa is mostly rural, so the information has not been disseminated to the rural people yet. So they have absolutely no clue what is happening in the church. And in any case, you want to talk about regionalization or disaffiliation, you find that people will simply walk out of church because you want to confuse them. So that has been the challenge. So now this initiative for us, it provides a way of people out there actually seeing what churches do. And for us, like I said, it's a plus. We are building up as we go. We started GMC, the four of us, and now we've grown to I think we should be next week. We should be on 15 congregations all over the country.
Wow.
No, not just in Harare. So it's really encouraging. We that's why I was saying that we hope that by the end of next year we'll be talking about 2 or 3 hope centers in Zimbabwe, and even beyond that, we could look at ways in which we can provide missional assistance to Africa as a whole, but focusing on sustainability rather than this dependency syndrome, because that really affected Africa as well. People were told what to think, when to think, and what to say, because there was the expectation that if you do not walk the way we want, or if you do not dance to the song, you won't get funding. So we want to move away from that, and this is why I was taken by the initiative that John and One Child do.
What's a Hope Center? You mentioned Hope Center, James or John. One of you speak to that. Tell us a little bit more about what is a Hope Center. What goes into fundraising that? What are some of the services and ministries that are involved in Hope Centers?
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to that. For us, as we're trying to advocate for kids in hard places, there are already those places in these communities, such as local churches, public schools, or Christian schools, where there are already child champions working. Local challenges need local solutions. And I think of I'm from Mississippi originally, and I think of every time I go back, the hollowing out of those towns that used to be so vibrant. And oftentimes it's because somebody puts a big box somewhere out on a highway. And when missions isn't done well, it could go like that. You put a big box somewhere with a slap a U.S. name on it, And then you invite the local church to be a part, and that actually can hollow out the ministry done in a community. So rather than coming in, putting a big box down and slapping our name on it, our model that One Child has and has had for decades is work with it. Jesus is already there, right? He's already on the move. He's already working in those communities. It's our responsibility is to listen and sense what he's already doing and where can we bring support. So a Hope Center could be any of those kind of locations, a church, a youth club in a building, or a school, whether it be a public school or a Christian school. So in our context in Zimbabwe, there are already great public schools all around our existing ministry. We've got 13 we call Hope Centers, and we partner every one of the churches that is near one of those with the school. We look for their own relationships they would have with that local school. And then we would go in and partner with that school to bring um, just the care and holistic care that comes through what you would typically see in a child sponsorship model. It's just that the local ministry runs the ministry, they are staffing the ministry, they are the champions, not us, some faraway place. So in the context of Zimbabwe, it's a great case study, a great example. When I met James and when I went into Global Methodist Conference at Costa Rica, our goal, myself and our president, Scott Todd, and our vice president, Ty Van Rensburg, all went to Costa Rica. And our goal, we would see a lot of our friends. That's fun. We'd met a bunch of them at all these different conferences. But our goal was we really need to meet the international delegates and leaders and build relationship with them, because ministry moves at the speed of relationship, right? And if we want to have a local first focus, then there needs to be a connection between the two. And praise God, man. Mac Parker gave us 8 hotels to choose from in Costa Rica and didn't give any context. And I was kind of late booking, so I just booked a hotel. It turned out that was the hotel where all the international delegates were. So
Ah,
we got a chance to build relationship, not just in conference, but outside of conference, at dinner and breakfast and on the bus and things like that. So as we got to talking about Zimbabwe, and we had a lot of common friends. I think James's dad was the pastor that did the premarital counseling for my director in Zimbabwe over 40 years ago. Just crazy. And then our on the ground field director, he's her distant uncle. He really is her uncle distantly. She's a Kawadza, her maiden name, even though it's 6 hours from where he lives. But we had a great kindred spirit from the start. And as we began talking about a Hope Center and doing child sponsorship and church to church partnership in Zimbabwe, it was running parallel to work that Blessman's doing in South Africa, as they were also working with One Child to establish a Hope Center with their existing ministry. You kind of see a pattern here. So I asked James, we had a 4-phase approach. I said, all right, well, what region of the country are you thinking is best? He said, John, I think we should be close as possible to the existing centers you have. We want to learn. We want to train. We want to lean in on the logistical expertise and ministry relationships you already have. So we chose Bulawayo, which is in the south of Zimbabwe. It's a good 6, I think, hours from James, if not further. And then I said, well, how about the congregation in Bulawayo? He said, you know what? We've got a couple, but they're meeting in one location together. They've merged. And I said, well, why don't you find out if there are any teachers in there, headmasters? He said, we have 4 of them. We're going back and forth, texting on WhatsApp and whatnot, and having calls every week. So I said, of those 4, which schools really have no international partnerships and are also open to Christian ministry happening throughout the week, not just after school? And it narrowed down to 2. So then he said, I'll go and do a site visit. So James has been down 4 times, I think, already. And I said, oh, okay, I'll fly you. He said, no, man, just give me money for a bus ticket. So he has gotten to know the bus route really well from Harare to Bulawayo. And so he said, I'll just stay in a B&B lodging or something like that and just keep it as low as possible. And so he's taken that bus many times, but they went to the 2 schools, and of the 2 schools, one of them was just kind of my understanding is with our team, our One Child team that's already established. We have 50 staff already there that work with several church networks. with our team walking through the school. It seems like what I heard was the first school was just kind of, are you guys done? And the second school, or the other school, to put it that way, they said, we've been praying and fasting for 3 weeks. Here's your office. When can you get started? So it was very clear where God wanted us to be. And so in that process, working bit by bit, they found 2 of their people in the Global Methodist Church in Bulawayo that were already youth and children's workers, that were seasoned, that were available. And so they began training and came on staff with us. Um, and they trained alongside and shadowed our other field workers in the 13 schools we're working in over there. And then they met with parents and teachers and headmasters together in a big meeting and said, we're going to do this together. We're going to have 200 kids enter the program for child sponsorship. And then the guys in the U.S. will travel around to some churches and develop a church-to-church partnership where the kids can all be sponsored from this one location, not 60 different countries, but from this one location. So each of those kids, now those 2 field workers have an office at the school. And last week, James went down for his 3rd trip, 3rd or 4th. I'm losing count. And it was the 4th. And during that 4th trip, they registered 200 kids that are entering our program. They're going to receive what you would often see in child sponsorship. They're receiving, yes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So we got to meet those existing needs, being sure there's a meal for every kid at school, being sure there's clean water and it's maintained well and sustainably. Then every kid in our program is also going to get healthcare provided, whether that be medications such as anti-parasite medications, so that when you're feeding the kid, you're feeding the kid and not also some kind of other organism that's affecting their nutrition. And then from there, the educational needs. School's not free in Zimbabwe. Matter of fact, it's around a 17% graduation rate in Zimbabwe. And part of the reason is because school's not free. People can't afford to get to a certain level. And if you haven't paid your school fees, you can't continue. And you also can't see your exit exam scores. So you can't even try to go to vocational school or college, university. So helping the parents with the school fees, uniforms, mentoring after school, and then our field workers are there with those 200 kids throughout the week. So all 200 just got registered. And so the gospel, once you've done all those things for a kid, the gospel it moves so much more quickly and beautifully. So I think I kind of captured, I think the Josiah Chinamora School is a great example of what is a Hope Center. And it's been fantastic so far.
That's incredible. John, I was about to try to tee you up and to hear the story of kind of what's taken place and how things are forming in Zimbabwe. James, I want to shift over to you because as John was just running through the process that you 2 have been in and with others, and seeing a Hope Center come to Zimbabwe, everything he just said, is there a story that sticks out to you, James, of a life, a child, maybe one of the workers there, somebody who's come on board, just a story that sticks out to you of the Lord working in the middle of all of this taking shape?
Yeah, well, besides what John said about the reception from the second school, we knew that the decision had been made. We even said it when we were driving in the car that, no, look, the decision has been made for us. But one thing that really touches me is we've got 2 kids in the program. The mother is late and the father just took off. And it was when we first sent out word that this is what we want to do. It was the neighbor from across the road who then volunteered to take these kids. And these kids, right, she didn't know, because we require some form of birth certificates and stuff like that. She didn't know where to get that. And she took it upon herself to find out, look for relatives and get those documents together. And now we're talking about a neighbor from just across the road. And these 2 kids, a 6-year-old now being the head of the house, and looking after the smaller one. So that story really, it it really touched me, because one of the sad things that we need to do when we select these kids for the program is to see where there's actual need, because you know how it is that some people might just want to benefit from the program, and yet there is actually no need. Both parents are working, and they can afford the basic care. So it's there's so many stories. So sometimes it's very difficult to divorce yourself from the job at hand and the emotions that are attached to the kind of work that we do. But the good news is now the woman from across the road has started going to our GMC church in Bulawayo. So you see there, that's the connection, and this started off from a conversation that I had with John. Was walking past his table in Costa Rica, and we just started having a conversation, and it carried on, it carried on, it carried on. When I presented to the team here, everybody liked it. So it's those friendships, it's these podcasts. People hear about that. Like this, I had a meeting for the General Conference Commission, and I was leaving. I just made up a point to say that, no, look, I'm going to this podcast. Some of you have already told, and then people that had been ignoring me, then just to say, oh, James, sorry, we need to talk about this. So that's how it works. But yeah, there's so many touching stories, but I just thought I should show you how, sometimes we just fit into God's plan.
John, thank you, James, for sharing that testimony. That's beautiful, and I'm thinking about what y'all have been saying as far as local challenges need local solutions, and how sometimes the big box hollows out ministry. And thinking about how ministry in America works, I can think of some experiences years ago where some of my family went to a local church, big box, big, huge mega church, and had a really hard time getting their spiritual needs met. You think about hollowing out ministry, and there's so many needs that aren't being met when it's a big attractive event, and that's kind of the main thing. John, you have experience also. Many of us have experience coming from the UMC. You have experience coming from a mega church context in America. Um, could you speak to a little bit of the hope that you have in the GMC, having had that experience in the mega church, and all the beautiful things that God does in the mega church? And also then how One Child also kind of fits in this missional context in Zimbabwe, in a different kind of way, like speaking again to how it's not just kind of the big box model or mentality to ministry.
Right. Absolutely. And I do want to say there are fantastic missional, high integrity people across big ministries and small ministries across the world. And I think, regardless of the size of our ministry, I think all of us get frustrated by some of the same things. And sometimes one of the frustrations is the speed of change. Sometimes a smaller organization can change and pivot much more quickly than a large organization. You guys have some experience with that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're wrong, so to speak, because many people are trying to be change agents in those organizations. So even within One Child, there are many things we want to change. We get frustrated by how quickly we can't make those pivots and moves. But in a 21st century context, there are a lot of things that need to change, that can solve. A lot of times when you can solve one problem, you can solve multiple at the same time. Transparency and connection. You want to connect church to church. Well, transparency's got to be there. So can you have a tool, a mechanism that will do such a thing, that will not only bring deeper relationship, but more transparency, more local ownership, more intercultural exchange? Because you say my background, I was a bus kid, age 11, lost as a goose in a snowstorm, whatever that means. In central Mississippi, in a context where hardly anybody in my family or my stepdad's family went to church, and I wasn't in church. But the little church with 50 people down the road from me, a little Methodist, United Methodist church, cared enough about the Lord and about kids in the community to take part of their funds and hire a part-time youth director. And he had to drive the church van, that old blue church van. And I knew to run from that thing when I saw it coming. And for 6 months, they chased me. They were after me. And finally, some of my friends started going and they started inviting me. I said, man, why would I want it? Why would I care about God? If God's so good, why is my life so bad? Here I was, an 11-year-old saying that. And believe me, there are 11-year-olds saying that in every one of our communities. So, um, when you think about hollowing out, I think hopelessness can often hollow out the opportunity for God to move in a community. And for me, that they told me though, they said, well, it's fun. We have a youth group. What's a youth group? Well, we eat. I said, hold on a second. What do you eat? And they said, hot dogs. I'm like, no one ever told me this. For 6 months, they were chasing me down. They didn't say they had hot dogs. I went to that little, I went to that little small church, man. And those people just loved on me. They knew my family. They knew our history. But that church loved on me. I came to faith within a few months. My youth pastor, Creighton White, he put me on the puppet team, the church choir, the church van team. I wasn't able to drive it yet, but I was doing all I could to help. Um, there's a lot we can accomplish from a small church or a large church component. I was called to ministry. We moved to another town, and I ended up connecting with a disaffiliated church back in the 80s that was independent. It was a Methodist church, and that church discipled me. I got into ministry as a youth pastor, working in that movement. Went to Wesley College, Florence, Mississippi. Dr. Chris Lorsdorfer was my instructor of holiness back in the 90s, back then in Jackson, Mississippi, Florence, Mississippi. Um, and moved to Florida after a couple of years to help with the church plant. Married my wife, and we have 2 kids now. I didn't mention that earlier. Married my wife, and we ended up in the mega church world. My whole life I had been either the only youth group member, kind of, or the only young adult, or the only college age. And so when I got married, I kind of felt like I needed to be in a church where I wasn't the only young couple. I didn't have a good role model as a kid, except for my youth pastor when I was 11. So I did get in the mega church world. I was a high school teacher by day and a youth pastor part-time by evening, and came on staff full-time. Went to be a missionary for 6 years after being a youth pastor for a few. Went to Northern Ireland to plant an amazing church with amazing people. That's kind of where a lot of my missiology was formed, was beginning to understand that I wasn't bringing Jesus to Northern Ireland. I mean, Billy Abraham had been there before, right? So God had thousands of years, and learning how often, and I came with the bad mentality, like I knew everything, that the way we do church in America is better. And a lot of it came out in the way I talked and the way I preached and taught. And what I
Mm.
learned after a couple of years was Jesus had been there. He was already at work, and he wanted me to participate in his work, and also partner with others in kingdom work. And that experience really formed me. Coming back to America and becoming a missions pastor within the church that sent me, I started feeling a lot of tension because it felt like a lot of the ministry of a lot of people was really based as a critique of other ministry. Like, we have the best church in town. We have the best
Mm.
men. We're going to be like this. And what we don't understand sometimes is when we keep saying there's also a they. And really, when you could go on your map, Google Maps, and put up church in your town and count how many churches there are in your town. But you know that there's only one right answer. There's only one church in your town, and it belongs to the Lord. We're here to steward it. And when we lose sight of that, we can become competitive no matter how big our youth ministry or church is. We can become competitive instead of cooperative. Um, we can think we're bringing Jesus instead of participating in what he's already doing. And so what I learned in that season of my life, which was 18 years in the megachurch world, was that God does beautiful things in big churches and small churches. He does beautiful things in large ministries and missions and in small ones. But we're all in this together. And when there's persecution and difficulty, that often breaks down those walls and barriers of our logos and our egos. So what other places like these third world countries were able to partner with, not just come and be the saviors of? They have so much to teach us about vitality and vibrancy of faith. And so the intercultural exchange, and I loved your last podcast I was able to listen to about your Rwandan and Bulgarian leaders preaching throughout Texas, because we need their message. We need each other. We don't, there isn't a dependency model of somebody just needs a check in the mail. I grew up with that. I got a child support check every month, but I needed a relationship. And as we can model great relationship, I think that can combat some of the bad names that Christianity and missions has had in situations like you said, with which large ministry becoming competitive, and I think the world has a way of beating us all down, and a lot of self-correction comes by the Holy Spirit. And I think we're in a moment right now in the GMC, where we know some things that don't work, but we also know God is at work, and we have an opportunity to listen to him and partner together, learn from each other, and watch and have our minds blown by what God accomplishes along the way.
It's too good. This is too good of a segue. Again, we have to acknowledge that our previous understanding, and this isn't a dig on our former denomination at all. This is human nature, right? This is way beyond just the last 60, 70 years. In the West, we have the tendency to write the check and pat ourselves on the back, and then kind of, go on about our business. I really am getting the impression from you guys that y'all aren't set up. Yes, there's funding that's needed. Yes, yeah, of course. But if someone's listening to this podcast, they're here in mid Texas, and they wanted to get linked up with One Child, they wanted to help with the Hope Center in Zimbabwe. What would that look like? What would that journey look like? And then, even this is for both you, John, and you, James. Kind of walk us through the trajectory and the arc of how that would start in here in mid Texas, and what it would the impact it would make on the other end of that step of obedience.
I can go. Zimbabwe's they've been leading in your movements and our movements for some time. We were watching and praying for them less than a year ago, right? And how they stood for scriptural holiness and authority of scripture and so many other things, not just the symptoms, but the root of some of the situations. Um, I, for us, we want to start where we are. These 200 families are going to get child sponsors this summer. We were at a dinner in Costa Rica. You guys were working so hard every day. Shay was one of the hardest working men in the GMC behind Pastor Jordan up in the heartland. Those guys were just in those sessions, just digging through language. But we had a dinner on Sunday night, and James's colleague, or sometimes boss, Simon, and some of the other guys said, let's get dinner. So we went to sit down, and Shay said, can I come sit with you guys? So we're sitting at a dinner together talking about the future and about what could happen. And I love in that moment, and I looked around, I said, man, there's a James, there's a Simon, there's a couple of Johns. I said, where's the Judas? And I can't answer what one of the guys said, but it was James, and he had quite a funny remark about, where's everybody from? But in that, Shay leaned over to me when I said, we need to go to churches. These guys are going to register the kids, but we need churches to enter the partnership and have partnership Sundays. Shay leaned over to me and said, I want to be the first. Come to Irving. So we're coming on May 4th. And unfortunately, he's the second. We're going to Tyler Street May 3rd that night. Lee caught up with us. She got a hold of us at Revive this year. But he was the first to commit. And so we're coming in with 50 kids or so. We'll have all of them, but we expect around 40 or 50 kids to be sponsored. A lot of folks have done stuff like this at Christian concerts or at conferences in the past, but the chances that they all sponsored in the same location at a place that was part of their denomination at the same school was probably quite low. So it'll be special to see that. And the sponsors, we're going through an app. We have an app called Bridgely, and the kids don't have the app, but the Hope Center does, and the field workers do. So you're going to see, if you've been involved in stuff like this before, what you're going to see is more transparency, more money to the field than any other model out there. And you're going to see an increased communication that goes from 3 or 4 things a year, letters here and there, to a lot more that you can send and can be sent to you when those kids are able to communicate with their field worker there. And all the communication is vetted, kept safe for the kids on both sides of the ocean with that. So that's how we start. We go church to church. I don't just go out, and one of my buddies from one of the larger churches said, "Why haven't you called us yet?" I said, "Well, I don't just open the phone book and find the biggest church. You want to work with relationship." And I said, "Now that we're friends, let's talk." So, and then he just forwarded my email to his missions pastor. But I can't say his name. He's not in the Mid-Tex Conference, but he is in Texas. So
Mhm.
it's good stuff. But we'll go one church at a time. And on the front end of this, we've had 20 churches across 6 conferences also give on the front end of this to help pay the initial staff salaries and set up the office, and committed to do Lent offerings for that. And uh, that's been a miracle thing in itself. And then at the same time, what you have to understand is isn't just about the kids in Zimbabwe and the families there in Bulawayo. There's about 10 other GMC churches in Zimbabwe. We're looking at expansion that direction as we get. The school has 1,100 kids in it. And, if their graduation rate is 17%, I know that our one-child graduation rate in Zimbabwe is over 78%. So great things are going to happen, and great intercultural exchange, and some pastors will come visit in the year to come for sure. As we've had, Rusty came to see it. Rusty Freeman, my good friend. That's how I got linked into all this stuff, was through Dr. Rusty, as many of us do. He came to Zimbabwe with me after we met at a couple of conferences and got to see the work, and that was big inspiration for a lot of what's happening now. So we'll go church to church, and obviously there'll be some links there for people to contact us. I come to Texas a few times a year. I'll be at Beyond These Walls and a few other conferences here and there. But our team is there and ready to engage churches regardless of their size. Um, and see churches develop that kind of partnership. And not just Zimbabwe's looking, but James can attest, the rest of Africa's looking. I mean, my phone has got Uganda and Zambia and Congo all talking about when can we enter phase 1. So we're having those kind of conversations because we do believe this is a way to have sustainably developed ministry, where a church overseas can broaden their donor base beyond the check that comes once a month or whenever, can broaden their donor base, become in true relationship with another church in the GMC, and interculturally exchange what God is doing in both locations, and see God not just help the kids on the ground in Zimbabwe, but inspire our churches here in the GMC and across the pan Wesleyan world that we're in.
That's awesome, and we cannot overemphasize enough the power of relationship that's coming through everything that you're saying about one child. James, this is for you. Have you had any other experiences before meeting John, before having one child and partnering with one child? Have you dealt with any other large organizations like a World Vision, like a Compassion International, or in a different space, a much larger organization? And can you speak to kind of the distinction and the special relationship of one child compared to some of those other experiences?
Well, I've only had one experience, and that was with World Vision. The I think it points out to what John pointed out, that mission assistance should be relevant to the people that are giving it. So there's a problem here where it's two-sided. Um, it's from the African side, and then we've got a problem also from the American side. The Americans, well, it's not much of a problem, but um, when you get aid, right? Um, it should be appropriate, and I feel that it should there should be accountability as well. I think John spoke of transparency, and that is usually the problem that we have from this end now, in accountability. And because it is church related, people do not want to, to question the perhaps the audit trail. But more importantly, what I just wanted to highlight is that if aid is going to come, and if we can use that aid to make ourselves sustainable, then that makes a much a bigger difference than just getting a check handed out every month or every year, and then people sit back and wait for that check, because it broods laziness on this end of the world too, and there's no meaningful development. That's why I give the example that, no, look, with one child, not only are we helping the children, but we're also creating employment for the church members of the GMC here. So, those are the kind of projects that we're looking at, legacy projects that have got a cascading effect of looking after people. And then those people then now, because you are gainfully employed, there's no reason for you not to tithe or not to have some kind of offering um, in church for Sunday, because this is some kind of Thanksgiving. If it's Pastor's Appreciation Month, that, things like that. And then by also doing that, we like I said, we're also bringing more people to Christ, as opposed to just funding, because the issue of accountability is really a problem. And because it's church related, people are not too keen on, investigating further if there's been abuse, of funds. So I think, look, I've always said that Africans should learn how to complain from Americans, and then Africans should teach Americans when to stop complaining, because that's how it works. These relationships, we teach other this kind of things so that we get better. And I feel that also, um, if a sponsor is not happy about things, they should say it so that everything is cleared up. Because if people don't say, the next thing, aid is cut, and then we don't know what went wrong. So I think the constant line of communications, knowing what the expectations are, and also just listening to each other, listening from both ends, really helps. But the experience that I had, well, in the end, they stopped, because the funds were not filtering to the levels that they were supposed to. So that's why you find that I'm an advocate of order and accountability, because I think we should be accountable to each other. And I feel even GMC needs to be accountable as a denomination to itself and to God as well.
I know if folks are hearing what I'm hearing, just there's so much confidence in just what you're saying as far as the accountability, the transparency, maybe not as much overhead. You got more mission dollars that are going towards making disciples and helping with the schools and the meals and the staffing and that sort of thing. That's beautiful. Is there a way right now today? You mentioned the Bridgely. Am I saying that right? The Bridgely app. With things like the Bridgely app, is there a call to action? Is there an ask today if people are moved to respond to help sponsor? To what are some of those things that folks can do today to help one child?
Yeah, we're going to be live with the Josiah Chinamoro School, which is our first Hope Center in Zimbabwe. We're going to be live at the end of April. So a person can download the Bridgely app and they can search Zimbabwe as the country. They have all our countries are at the top, the flag. Search Zimbabwe and you'll see we're the one center. And you can go in there right there and join the cause community. So in the cause community, there are children to be sponsored, but also as the GMC has needs, we will put up some kind of GoFundMe type projects within the secure environment where you can see the progress of the money being raised. If somebody in Tennessee gives, it's going to show up on the barometer. It's going to let you know where things are at. Two people aren't going to give to the same exact child. Two people aren't going to give to the same specific, $100 piece of something when it comes to a project. So that they'll have opportunity. I was just thinking about this morning. My heart is broken to talking to different GMC um, um, over parts of our global church, not an American church with international appendages. Shout out to a previous podcast you had with one of your younger great evangelists. But
Catherine Riley, perhaps?
yeah, come on, somebody.
Possibly? Come on,
Come on.
Catherine. Let's go.
But, you know, I get all the newsletters. I see the needs. There is need. And one of the needs is for pastor funding, pastor families, school fees for pastors. So we're blessed in Zimbabwe. We have just a few churches and a couple of pastors. So what we're probably going to do, I'm making the executive decision before asking James. We're probably in the cause community going to highlight a couple of those pastors that churches can partner with to help pay the school fees outside of the Josiah Chinamora School. There, a couple of those churches that may have needs, but that pastor will be expected to post a monthly update, and even more than, by video, audio, pictures, all those things. It's not just a name on a newsletter. It's going to be a story you're a part of, and a story that they can be part of yours as well as you communicate with them. So churches can join cause community, and I'm praying and believing. I was in line with Dr. Leah, Bishop Leah, last night, and I was talking to her. I said, "How you guys have done Bulgaria is so beautiful." I said, "Who's your missions person?" She said, "It's me." And I said, "We really need to share that. If there's any way you could have somebody share that with us, so we could tell the other international expressions of the GMC. This is how these kind of church to church partnerships, country to country, are working, because what you're doing is so beautiful. The way you're doing it, it's not going to be 3.5 years from now, or 2.5 years from now. The newsletter out of Mid-Tex GMC is not going to say, we're still trying to meet this need we were trying to reach 5 years ago. It's going to be, we have new projects. We are sustainable on the ground in Bulgaria, and we want to see the same kind of things happen in Zimbabwe, across Africa, across the Philippines, Asia, Latin America. We want to see those same things happen."
So, in the spirit of transparency, I'm glad you said that, John, because one of the questions I had was around um, so the nature of our partnership, so in conference level, and the nature of how organizations like One Child partner with the GMC. So, like in the spirit of transparency, like we have a formal, the GMC. When I say we, I'm talking about the GMC right now, has a formal partnership with like Guidestone for health insurance and pension type stuff, things like that. There's a formal partnership with like ILI, International Leadership Institute. What's the nature of the relationship with One Child? That's one question that I have. And then also, like, I'm just thinking about everything James, you and John have shared. Like what y'all are doing is in a big way so compatible and similar to, I feel like, what some of these funding models and the work on the ground and relationship building that Mid Texas and Bulgaria, and now Mid Texas and Rwanda, Mid Texas and Costa Rica are trying to do. So it's like, man, I'm just sensing this beautiful marriage of what you're doing, what we've been trying to do in Mid Texas. That, yeah, we may have established some of those relationships before other conferences, but in the meantime and going forward, it seems like One Child's just this perfect. With your vision of ministry and everything that you've said, it seems like it fits like a glove.
Right. And we've had these discussions. Um, Bishop Jones got to the point where he would laugh when I showed up at a conference. He would ask, "Where's his crumble cookie?" I went to Crumble Cookies 35 times in the past 2.5 years going to these conferences. The goal wasn't to get conference partnership. It was to get to know each other. And I ask as many questions as I can, learning great things in the Doctor of Ministry program that Rusty hooked me into. I'm asking as many questions as I can, trying to and not talk so much. But the questions I've been asking of people in like Wesleyan Network for Global Mission, the kind of questions I'm asking those people is, what are your needs? The questions I've asked the conference superintendents like Reverend Jordan at Heartland, what what how can we serve you? Yeah, this is what we're doing. You can get our website and see that. How can we serve you? And you know, Jordan said to me last year, he said, "Have patience with us." And Bishop Jones had said something similar. And how many conferences out here somebody say, "Building a bridge when we're walking on it," which sounds a lot better than "we're building an airplane while we're flying it," by the way.
Mm. True.
I would say the missional piece is, it's a next piece. It's one of those that you'll have to have patience with. We'll all have to have patience with, because first, you I mean, a denomination's been formed. And there's been so much work on the local level that's had to be done and for every conference across the world. So these missional partnerships, though they're not secondary in need or even nature, just the urgency of the time is the missional organizations have had to be patient and find how they can best serve the Global Methodist Church and not vice versa. Again, it's something we have to unlearn. Um, so when I go speak at a GMC church or a disaffiliated church somewhere across America, and I do that almost every other Sunday somewhere, um, I always ask the pastor, where have you been involved missionally? We're not going to come if you already have a child sponsorship relationship. But I ask, where are you missional? Oh, you're helping this missionary? I know them, or I know somebody at World Gospel Mission, or I know somebody at One Mission Society, these great ones. I know Shannon at ILI. Oh my goodness. Big shout out to her. But I know these folks. And so I make it a point to thank the congregation, but I also ask, what are you doing locally in mission? I want to encourage you with that because I wouldn't be here if Caleb Methodist Church didn't have a bus ministry. Okay. So I think for the missional partnership and where things are at, I think it's in a very similar stage that a lot of you were in 2 years ago, where things are being developed, things are being figured out. And it's similarly to what you went through on the ecclesiological level, the missiological piece and component it's going to lay in well, as a lot of the conferences have now established mission leaders that are volunteering. I talked to a lot of them, and the big thing is, just like before, the administrators, can they learn from one another? So a lot of us are connecting them with each other at this time. So right now, partnership with us, we want it to be driven from the field. So that's why Global Methodist Church Zimbabwe is our official partner in you know, we want them to drive the partnership because I think there's a dignity to that. There's one of our core things of our declaration on Bridgely. Our Bridgely declaration is dignity. I'll read it because, we commit to radically uphold the dignity of people in low-income communities. We reject ideologies that present the poor as objects of benevolence. Instead, we empower work that puts people at the center of their own growth and development. So as I'm walking on a bridge that's not yet quite fully built, I, I, I want to see the work empowered on the ground overseas that puts James and Sheila and Mary and